now. Welcome to this session.
This session examines the ongoing relevance of Agile methodologies, highlighting how leadership support and a culture of continuous improvement are crucial for successful Agile transformations, illustrated through real-world team experiences. With 16 years in the industry and certifications in various Agile methodologies, our next speaker has excelled in Agile training and enablement, leading workshops, community of practice sessions, and supporting Agile teams, Scrum Masters, and product owners. She'll share insights on building successful Agile teams. Let's all welcome Ms. Mario Christine Raz.
Okay, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Maria Christine Raz. I'm an Agile coach from Quantrix. You can call me Marielle. And today I will be sharing with you some insights on how to build Agile teams with the right culture and leadership support. Let me just quickly share my screen. All right, can you just let me know if you can already see my screen? Okay, so I'll move on straight to our agenda for today. So of course, I'll be sharing an introduction on myself and our organization at Quantrix. We'll have a brief a brief discussion. It will just be via polls. So I would like to get your engagement. Also, feel free to also add your questions in the Q&A section, and also via the chat. If you have any insights, feel free to do so. And of course, some key tips or strategy points for building teams, Agile teams with the right culture and leadership support. And finally, the conclusion. All right, so I'll start off with introducing myself. So my name is Marielle Christine Raz. You can call me Marielle Raz. So I've started as a software tester, actually, as my Agile journey started back in, oh gosh, this will probably date me, 2008, when I was when I started as part of an Agile team at the startup back in London. So it was a very small Scrum team, and I was practicing software testing back then. Then when I came back to the Philippines back in 2011, and I became a software tester also for an HR software company. A lot of you may have seen me there, and that's also where I started my Scrum Master journey. So that's at 2015. I'm currently an SPC6 certified, and back in 2018, I was actually certified with SPC 4.5. We did have the safe implementation here in the Philippines as per our trainers. It was apparently the first safe implementation in the Philippines. So I'm not sure if that's correct, but yeah, I'll take their word for it. And so after that, I've moved on to a pharmaceutical company. And then currently, I'm with Quantrix, where we currently support the leading telco in Canada. All right. So just a brief overview on Quantrix. What is Quantrix? So it's a subsidiary of Nordia, which is Canada's largest provider of customer service solutions. And we deliver specialized services in IT development. We started back in 2016 as a BPO contact center. And in 2017, our business actually expanded with IT development and shared services, having, of course, the leading telco in Canada as our major client. I joined Quantrix just last year, to support our client in their Agile transformation, which also started April of last year. So they're currently implementing safe scaled Agile, but we do also have in Quantrix, we do have standalone Agile teams practicing Scrum and also Kanban. So we have been onboarding our teams in support of our clients' models. So we're basically following the model of our client in how they're currently implementing Agile. All right, let me move to the next slide. Okay, so this is where I will actually need your help. Just some insights on where you're currently at. So I'll start off with the first poll, which is what industry you're currently in. So I've added here some options, whether you are in software product development, banking or finance, HR consulting, healthcare or pharmaceuticals, and also if you're in training or education. If it's none of the above, you can select others and probably just add in the chat what your current industry is. Okay, I'll just probably give a minute or two just so I can also see how many of you are in which industry, so I can probably give more examples that can help support you. Okay, it looks like we have a lot from, of course, the software and product development companies. So nice to see everyone here. Thank you again for taking the time to join this session. All right. Okay, so there's a few also from training and education and also healthcare and pharmaceuticals, and a few also from HR and consulting. Okay. All right, I will. Okay, wow. So that's interesting. Motorcycle dealership. Thank you, Kent, for that sharing. All right, I think there's a lot of others, so just feel free to go through the chat. I'll try and get back to it later. Okay, so I'm gonna close the poll now. Thank you, and I will again publish, of course, the next poll, which is the agile transformation mandated by your leaders? So yes, if yes, of course, no, or if you're not sure, that's also okay. And if it does not apply to you, then we have NA here. Okay, so thank you for participating. That's good. So a lot of you have agile transformation mandated by your leaders. So that's a good start. Okay, and maybe give another minute for this one before I move on to the next. Okay, closing the poll now and on to the next one. So does everyone understand why you are doing this? So why you are actually doing the agile transformation in your company? Has it been communicated to you? Maybe all throughout the organization, if you're doing agile, what was the reason why you actually started doing agile? Is it because you wanted to be, in the in the trend, because agile was a bit a buzzword before, so everyone wanted to move to agile, even though it takes a lot of time and effort to actually do the transformation, right? So okay, so a lot of yeses from everyone understanding why the agile transformation is happening. So that's a good sign. So thank you. All right, I'll probably close this poll and then I'll move on to the next one, which is, do you have available support before and during the transformation? Okay. So yes, a lot of support, 64%, 67, no, Some 7%, not sure. That's okay. If it does not apply, that's also okay. Okay, so a lot of yeses in there. So a total of 64%. And I'll close that poll. And on to the final one. Right, so I think, hold on, let me just, there. Are your company's expectations realistic? Okay, so 59.26 percent said yes. 18.52% said no. The others are not sure, and the others that not does not also apply. Okay, so I think that's it for the post today. So thank you for participating. Thank you for letting me know where you're currently at in the agile transformation. And I do hope that our session today will give you some insights on how your company can be more agile, or how agile will actually work for you. Because I just want to note, of course, our theme for this year's softcon is, of course, resiliency and adaptability, right? And there's a lot of discussions, debates going online about agile being dead. I'm sure there's a lot of emotions and opinions about that, which is okay, right? And I do understand that for some people it may probably not work for them anymore, and that's also okay. But in our organization, of course, we are still doing agile since it's currently being implemented by our client. And so as people, as team members who support our client, we do want to ensure that they have the right support in terms of implementing agile as well. Okay. Okay, so I will be moving on to some of the tips or insights in how to build agile teams with the right culture and leadership support. So first off, aligning leadership support. So of course, we have to ensure that the leadership understands and supports the agile approach, because it has, if a lot of people actually answered yes if it's mandated by the leaders, right? So that's good, as long as it's communicated to you, because you, if you're currently part of the working teams, right, it should be communicated to you why you're doing agile in the first place. Is it because we want to be ahead in our industry, we want to beat the competition? And that's a good start, right? And of course, once you do start doing agile, it would also help if your leaders also practice it. It might be a big ask, but it's been done in most of the companies that I've worked with. And once you do have their support, once they do understand why you're actually doing this, then um, it's also good for them to practice. So at least should be able to actively support the agile practices. And in terms of course, removing the obstacles, and providing the necessary resources and encouragement, as well as, of course, transparency in communication. So with Quantrix, of course, we do have our executives aligned because we want to also follow what our client is currently doing, and so our executives are also aware of why we are doing agile at Quantrix. Okay, and finally, the teams need empowerment, of course, in terms of driving autonomy and accountability, right? We want to give them the environment for them to feel empowered, and also that uh, have that safe space in terms of innovating as well. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Okay, a second tip is, of course, cultivate a collaborative culture. So, of course, it may be cliche. I'm sure in a lot of your retrospectives, you see this in your post-its, right? Teamwork, right? Why do we need teamwork? Because teamwork is actually essential. It's related to having that autonomy and empowerment, right? Because if you've been working with your teams for a short time, then you won't really know yet how you will be able to deliver a high quality product in terms of problem solving and innovation. So it's important that you have that support in terms of teamwork for your teams. Okay, and then of course, again, the environment where team members feel safe to take risks and make mistakes, right? So, team dynamics is key. Of course, when we're starting in our agile transformation, right, we do go through the Tokpan stages. We start with a forming, and then we do the norming, and then when they're quite forming and then storming. So storming, of course, it's the first time that they're working with each other, and they don't know yet how to help each other in terms of delivering the sprint goals. So once they get the hang of that, then they move on to the norming stage, and then finally, if they're really good with how they're working with each other, then they move on to the performing stage. Okay, and then for the last bit, encouraging open communication. So trust and focus on team goals over individual assessment. So again, it's important to break silos, and this is going to be a difficult journey if you're just starting, and it takes a bit of time, right? So, I actually experienced this in when I started becoming a Scrum Master, right? I was a software tester, and then I moved to becoming a Scrum Master. And then, as a software tester, obviously, your goals are finding the bugs. And then, as a developer, your goals are not having bugs. So if you don't have that same goal in your delivery, then you would obviously have conflicts, right? And so I can't remember actually having that conversations between the developers and testers, because ever since I practiced Agile, it's really good to have team members, whether they're developers or testers, to actually work together and align on their sprint goals, and be able to deliver a high quality product. Okay. All right. So I'll move on to the next slide. So again, if you do have questions, feel free to add them in the Q&A section. All right. So offering continuous learning opportunities. So of course, learning doesn't stop after onboarding. So do make sure that there's the support that's available. So whether it is just training or coaching sessions, if you have an agile coach, that's good. If none, then probably whoever is capable of giving you that support, because it's important to actually support the people who have not been doing this for a long time. If they do have an experience on Agile, then yes, that's good. But if it's their first time to do Agile, then you might need that extra hand to support your team members and ensure that you have that open communication, making sure that you get feedback also from them in terms of what's working or what's not working. All right. And of course, you have to support the experimentation, and skill development. So enable teams to foster collaboration, of course, and continuous improvement. So a good venue for that is, of course, communities of practice, right? So it's a good venue for teams to discuss, share their knowledge, challenges, work on how to resolve those challenges. And at Quantrix, we actually have communities of practice in place. Once a lot for our general team members, and also we do have communities of practice for role specific, so Scrum Masters, and also those that are part of Agile release trains. And we do also have communities of practice in our client side. So it's really open to those who are part of the Agile release trains and the teams that are part of our current teams. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Okay, so this is probably a tricky one. Establishing clear goals and measures. So I did ask earlier, are your goals realistic? Are your company's goals realistic, right? So whether it's your KPIs or OKRs, my opinion is make it attainable. Because if it's not something that your organization can actually achieve, then it might be difficult for those that are part of the transformation, especially for the working teams, right? So make sure that's also communicated to those that are part of the agile teams at the organization. So make sure that it's available to everyone. Why are we doing this? So in terms of the goals, it's because we want to probably have more customers, generate more leads, or if we want to lessen the production support, that can also be a good goal. So it depends on what product you're currently building, and of course the customers that you support. And of course, it would be helpful if you measure targeted outcomes rather than just the output, right? So it's important that what you bring out there is of value, and not just because you're delivering the numbers that needs to be met, that need to be met by your organization. So make sure that um, the product that you're building is actually measured by how the customers are using it. That's probably one measure to look at. Also, probably churn rate. If if it's getting lower, right, then that's also a good thing. Um, and if you're getting ahead of the competition, that's probably also a good thing. And it's all because of the products that your agile teams are currently delivering. Okay. And then finally, make sure again, like I mentioned earlier, communicate all the changes to the goals. If of course if it's something that's not attainable, or if you were able to validate that it's not working, like these goals are probably too difficult or not realistic to achieve, then it would make sense to actually update them based on the current business status or your current business goal. And also share so more context and not just numbers, and what's important for the organization, and of course the customers that you're currently supporting. So make sure that everyone is aware of any changes to your metrics, because this is where the teams will probably focus on, so that they can deliver a more high quality product. Okay. And then finally, of course, to adapt and iterate. So this may sound cliche, but what's important is the feedback, right? So feedback is gold. So if you can try to probe more on the feedback given by the teams, and be able to have for those that they have control to improve on, that's good. But there will probably challenges that the teams may encounter that may need support from your leaders. So it would be good to actually roll that up to your leaders, whether your scrum master, or if you can participate directly as team members in discussions, or probably town halls where your executives or leaders are there. Make yourself heard, because you're an important part of the company. You are actually delivering the product for your customers. So make sure that you have that venue, you have that opportunity to communicate with your leaders, so that they're also aware on the challenges that you're currently facing. Of course, next is the mindset. So change in mindset. This is the most difficult one in probably in my experience as an agile coach, um, and it's quite valid, because for people who are new to this thing, who haven't really experienced agile yet, there will be a lot of resistance, and that's normal. Right? Any change, if you don't understand it, you won't really know how to deal with it. That's why my suggestion is, of course, communicate, right? Why, again, go back to the why are you doing the transformation, right? And also be careful of change fatigue, because of course the transformation involves a lot of changes in the structure, team structure, and also probably the processes within your organization. So make sure that you give your team some time to actually understand the change that they're undergoing prior to starting or implementing another change. So make sure that you have probably a good time frame is within 3 to 6 months, right? So if it's the first time that they're practicing Scrum or Kanban or Safe, then it would help if they get the hang of it first before another change is implemented. Okay? And then finally, so again, improving the communication and ways of working across the organization is key, right? So communicate with transparency. And again, if possible, have that discussion with your leaders so that they also know what help you need, and also in turn celebrate small wins, right? Because if you're delivering something that's of high value, of high quality, then it's a good product for your company to have. And if you're part of the teams that are delivering these products, then it would help if you also share your small wins, like how you were able to uh, resolve any challenges that you are encountered in delivering the product. Okay, all right. So I'll move on to, of course, our conclusion. So again, Agile will work for your organization if everyone is aware and aligned to the purpose. So again, from the leaders to the working teams, because Agile is for the whole organization. And if some people do not understand why you're actually doing this, it can be a cause of miscommunication, misalignment, and of course people will probably think it's not working because they do not understand how it actually works. Okay, so continuous support and coaching may be required. Of course, it will be required until all the teams are used to the new ways of working. So, as I mentioned earlier, have coaching sessions, whether for leaders or team members. Make sure that you have that channel, whether it's via monthly coaching, or if you do coaching clinics, that will also help, or simply just reaching out to your Scrum Master or Agile coach, and just tell them what does not make sense for you so that they can also help you. Um, and especially if you do have community of practice sessions, that's also a good venue to share what's not working or what's working for you. And again, if you do have leaders who are actually practicing or doing Agile, that's a great plus, because as team members, if you see your leaders doing Agile and being Agile, right, it's probably a good motivation for you also to be able to thrive in Agile. Okay? And of course, there's no such thing as over communicating, unless of course it's something that shouldn't be communicated, right? So make sure that any change to the structure or the process is available or shared, especially to those teams that are impacted of such change. So do communicate that as often as these changes happen. But again, I mentioned, please be mindful of change fatigue. Okay? And craft and measure goals related to business outcomes. Again, not just the output, so business outcomes. Ensure that everyone is aligned so that the teams can work together in meeting them. So make sure that you validate the metrics in place. If they are met or if they're not achievable, then it's probably a good time to revisit. So again, make sure that it's realistic and can be attainable by your teams, um, because if it's not, then it might be difficult for your organization to also meet the goals, and also deliver the product to your customers as how they would want it to be. So just be mindful of any metrics that you put in place, if it's not working for you as a team member, as part of a team, make sure to also have that heard. So again, reach out to your leaders, your scrum masters, your agile coaches, your team leads. Make sure that the channel is available. And finally, check and adjust as needed based on feedback loops. So again, feedback is gold. Make sure that you share your feedback, and also solicit feedback if needed, so that you have that feedback to leverage on if there's something that needs to be improved, whether it's the current process or the structure of your teams, your agile teams. Make sure that you have that heard. Okay, and I think this is my final slide, and can move on for a few minutes of Q&A.
All right. Thank you, Miss Marielle, for your presentation. So why don't we show our appreciation to Miss Marielle by clicking your emojis? So send your hearts. Yes, I've seen some hearts, claps. Thank you so much. All right. I see some cheers here. Thank you so much for sending your appreciation. So now we have a lot of questions for you here, Miss Marielle. So let me start with the first one. This is from Miss Rachel Ann Carrillo. So the question is, would you suggest implementing agile methodologies for a small team?
Yes, so thank you, Rachel, for that question. Actually, Agile would work if you have a small team. Like I mentioned, in my experience, I was actually part of an Agile team, a very small Agile team. We were just, I think, 3 or 4 team members. So there were 3 developers, and I was the tester. So, and I did some deployments as well back then. So it would actually help smaller teams, and the right the right number, well, if it's, as long as it's less than 10 members, you are okay to go agile with that team. So if you're actually gonna start transforming, I would suggest starting with the small teams first.
All right, thank you, Miss Marielle. So moving on to our next question. This is from an anonymous attendee. So the question is, what are some specific actionable steps leaders can take to foster a culture that supports agile principles, especially in organizations that are more traditionally structured?
Okay, so that's a very good question. Thank you for that. So I would start off by actually involving leaders in the activities that the teams are going to be doing. So if they're just starting to do scrum or agile, try and have them observe in one of the events, such as probably backlog refinement or sprint planning. And of course, the sprint review is the most important one, right? And so that you, because they're already doing sprints, they have that opportunity to actually observe in what the teams are doing. And of course, be mindful, because sometimes when they are there, team members will probably behave differently. They will probably be a bit more shy or quite scared to actually speak up. So you will need your scrum masters there to facilitate such discussions. So again, for the leaders to actually see, so it's called the Gemba walk, if go and actually see where the work is being done, so that they also understand how they can support the teams.
All right, thank you, Miss Marielle. So we have a question here from Colleen. The question is, how should teams collaborate to ensure successful projects using the agile approach?
All right. So collaboration is key, of course, in Agile, and it doesn't really mean that the activities that you should be doing should be just work related. So, of course, building relationships like any other teams, it would be good if they do something uh, that is outside of work. So make sure that there are available workshops, like probably doing some activities during, if you do have an agile workshop, you can do some activities like the coin flipping, or you can also simulate how scrum is being done, how sprint planning and sprint review, for example, is going to be done. And if you do have other activities that you can do, so normal activities that, like the marshmallow challenge, if you've heard of it, that's actually a good team building activity as well.
All right, thank you, Miss Mariel. So I hope Miss Mariel was able to answer. I hope you're happy with the answer of Miss Mariel, Miss Colleen. So moving on to our next question. This is from Sheena Diaz. So the question is, how do you address conflicts within teams during the agile process?
Right. So this I've actually experienced firsthand. Because when I was a scrum master, of course, I used to be a tester, and the developers think that as a scrum master I would take the tester side. And it's important that you have a scrum master that is capable of being neutral. So ensuring that you do not take sides, because it will be very difficult to break down the silos. It would take time. So if there are any miscommunications, or worst case, if they're really like if they're fighting, that's okay. Just give them the time to sort themselves out, because it's not something that can happen overnight. So that's why you have specific events that, like the retrospective. Make sure that you leverage on that, and make sure that you encourage your team members to speak up during the retrospectives, because if they are fighting already and they're still not sharing that in the retrospective, then it will be difficult for the whole team to resolve. And again, remind them that they're working as a team and they're building a product as a team, not just an individual.
All right, thank you, Miss Marielle. So we have another question from an anonymous attendee. So the question is, what approach would you suggest for teams that wants to transition to agile, but the process and stakeholders are still using waterfall?
Okay, so if again, like I mentioned, the agile transformation should like be communicated. If it's something that you want to probably instigate at the working level, I would suggest probably identifying justifications why you want to do agile. Probably identify the advantages. If we do agile, we would have shorter sprints. We would have shorter delivery time. We can get real-time feedback for our customers, and we can have high-performing teams, highly productive teams that are actually working with each other to build a product. So it would be probably highlight something that your teams can deliver um, doing agile, as compared to doing it in the waterfall process, because it would be important to actually help your stakeholders understand why you want this to work. And if you have that visibility on your team having that capacity to do it, then make sure that is also communicated to your leader, so that they give you a chance in transforming to agile.
All right, so we have another question here. So the question is, what can you say about someone saying agile is the biggest scam in software development?
Right. So I would actually want more context on that. I mean, because I'm an agile practitioner. I've been an agile practitioner for a long time, and there's a lot of these things going on around. So and for me, what matters is what you experience personally. And if they think it's a scam, it's probably because they were led to believe something that was not really going to happen. So that's why I always say be transparent, right? Communicate the change properly. Don't do false promises, or don't give false hopes, right? Give, when you do agile, it's going to take time. It's not going to change overnight. So make sure that they are aware that it will take time and it will take people to learn and understand the processes, and changes in structure. So just tell them that it will not change overnight, and it will also it will also take some investment from the people involved for them to also learn, and understand why they're doing agile in the first place.
All right. So this is a question from Ron Pedreswa. Dreswola. So the question is how to deal with spillover tickets from the previous sprint. Do you have any framework approach or any strategy to recommend?
Okay, so spillovers, it usually happens because of a lot of reasons. One, probably because they did not plan it ahead, or probably something in the middle of the sprint happened that caused that particular spillover. So I would say doing the refinement, backlog refinement prior to your sprint planning, ensuring that your user stories are actually ready before you pull them into your sprints. Um, and when you do estimate the work that you need to do, make sure that you also factor in any complexities, any unknowns, right? Something that could probably happen that you're not sure of yet, especially if you're dependent with other teams also. So yeah, during backlog refinement, make sure that all the scenarios are also considered, so that when you do sprint planning, and when you take on these user stories, you will have enough information. But again, spillovers are okay. It's not a bad thing. It's an opportunity for your teams to also learn that probably they estimated not so well this time. And the important thing there is they learned from that mistake and hope to improve on that in the succeeding sprints.
All right. So for our next question, this is from Chris Manalastas. So the question is how can we support non-technical individuals during a transformation to improve their tech maturity rating?
Okay, so I'm quite curious on the tech maturity rating. Are we talking about agile maturity, or but in terms of non-technical, I've actually supported teams from HR, mostly from recruitment. They were able to transform to Kanban, and we also had marketing teams to do Scrum. So I would suggest that prior to actually transforming to agile, to understand the current process, right? So if you can do a value stream mapping, that would help. If not, just a normal process mapping, like how the work is currently being done, um, how the value is being achieved. And from there, you can actually check if agile will work for you, especially if you want to do sprints, right? If you want to do 2 weeks or monthly sprints, if you need to get that feedback from your stakeholders or customers, then that's a good start. But again, before you start doing something, make sure that you understand why you actually want to do agile, what's currently not working. That's why it would probably be helpful to do agile first.
All right. So, moving on to our next question. This is from Christian Jarek James. So, the question is what are the biggest challenges organizations run into when switching to agile methodologies, and what strategies are the best to make the transition smooth and successful?
Okay, so biggest challenge for me is of course resistance, which is common resistance because they do not understand the change, why they need to go agile. So that's why I mentioned that make sure that the why is clear, why they want to transform to agile, not just because everybody else is doing it, that's why we're going to do it. So that's not good enough. If you if you can ask the leaders or whoever is involved in the transformation, ask them why we want to do this, what are our goals, and also it's important to have that baseline, because if you do want to to do agile, make sure that you're currently measuring how you're doing it prior to agile, so that once you start going agile you can actually compare from how you do the work previously, and the results and that you currently achieve. So this is admittedly one of the things that do not, well, at least in the organizations that I've been part of, since I've joined in the middle of the transformation. So it's something that's not there for a lot of organizations. So having that baseline prior to doing agile would actually help, so that you can compare how you're delivering more, or if not, then at least you have that baseline to look back to.
All
Did
right.
I answer your question? Hope.
I think you did, Miss Maria. So, moving on to our next questions. This is also from another anonymous attendee. So, how do you address the misalignment between iterative nature of Agile with a hard deadline and finish all requirements expectation from your stakeholders?
Wow. So yes, this is quite common also. And I would suggest to probably communicate this, because there's a lot of I don't want to say fake agile, but there's a lot of misimplementation of agile going on, right? So just because you're doing sprints, it doesn't mean you're actually agile. Like I mentioned earlier, the mindset change. So if you're just cutting your work into into 2 weeks, that doesn't mean that you're actually doing agile. Make sure that at each sprint you actually have something that is deliverable, or it's usable at least. And this may be hard to achieve, of course, in the first few stages of the transformation, but make sure that it's not the same thing that you were doing, but just doing it in sprints, or just using a tool that agile teams use. So having that mindset change is actually immersing yourself in the change, and not just doing the same things and just calling it agile. So if you have that opportunity, and if you have the courage, go ahead and communicate that to your leaders.
All right. So, this is a question from Miss Danica. So, the question is, how do we boost Agile with the current growing AI? Can you share some insights on how you integrated AI in this?
Hmm. So I would think AI will never actually replace people who do the work, especially they don't really have the emotions face to face, right? So AI will always be there to support the teams, but it will not replace what the teams are doing. It would be good if we support AI in a manner that we can actually leverage on what we can get from AI, but not really just be dependent on the AI to do our work. So having the collaboration during the sprints, and probably during the sprint reviews, you can show what AI has helped you with in your sprint deliverables. But again, not forgetting that you're still working as a team, and AI is just there to help you build a more quality product.
All right. Thank you. So, our next question is from
Oh,
Michelle
there's a lot
Jane
of
Castillo.
questions. Okay.
Yes, ang dami po nating questions. And I think we have many time pa po to go over all the questions. So this is from Miss Michelle Jane Castillo. So the question is, in banking operations, can they do agile framework? How?
So yes, they can. Of course, I would suggest that, of course, in banking, like in telco, they also have a lot of regulatory requirements. So you can take that away from these organizations, but at least ensuring that how the product is built, you can actually do that in an agile manner. If you're able to release the product um, by doing Scrum, because it's important, right? Like actually, it's in most of the apps now. So if you're using, I don't know what banks you're currently in. I currently have BPI, Security Bank, and the apps that they have now, I think they're delivered by Agile. Why? Because if you see the updates on these apps, right? It doesn't take 6 months to deliver. Doesn't take a year to deliver, right? The minute there's a new feature that they can push out, they actually do that. And that's the agile way of doing things, right? Making sure that once you have something that's shippable, that's going to help your customers, right? You have these feature toggles, right? If it's ready, you deploy it to the customers. So definitely yes, just be mindful of course the regulatory requirements, and for the stakeholders probably related to the question earlier, just sticking to a certain timeline would probably not help. Try to manage things. Probably if you can negotiate, something's got to give, right? If you have to deliver something at a certain timeline, then you have to negotiate on the scope. You can't really deliver all of that at the same time, um, just by doing overtime. So I would recommend against that. But if that is required, especially if it's a production support, right? If it impacts a lot of users, then yes, you have to have that done immediately. But if it's a new feature, I would suggest, plan for it accordingly, um, and just negotiate on when the teams can actually deliver.
All right, thank you, Miss Mariel. So, this is from another anonymous attendee. So, the question is, how can organizations effectively balance the need for agile teams to be self-organizing and autonomous with the need for centralized leadership and support?
Okay, so centralized leadership and support will always be there, I'm sure, but it can coexist, but it can also be a conflict. So just be mindful when you say self-organizing, right? It doesn't really mean that you completely let go, right? You have to have that discipline that if they're currently capable of just doing things on their own, then yes, that's fine. But you still have to be able to check with them if there's something that they still need support on, right? So if they don't, that's good. But if they do have the opportunity to share to the leaders how they're currently doing the work, then it would probably be a good venue or opportunity for the leaders to also understand that, oh, the teams are actually doing very well. I don't really think we should micromanage them. So that's one step. Actually seeing how the teams work and how they deliver the work would actually question the mindset of, do I really need to micromanage them?
All right, thank you, Miss Mariel. So, moving on to our next question. This question is, what can you suggest to leaders without proper training or enough experience in Agile, but saying we are Agile?
Then in your question itself, training. So in the transformations that I've been part of, right, we start off by enabling them, and not that doesn't just go to the working teams. It actually has to start from the leaders. So any agile transformation that happens, right, you have to have that training available for the leaders, because they will be the first ones that should understand it, because they're the ones who will ask people to implement it, right? So um have them, I mean, if they don't have an agile coach, there's a lot of training now online, LinkedIn Learning, and other channels that we have, right? So even those simple trainings will do. But again, it's important that they have the necessary training, because they can't just learn agile by the word itself or just from hearsay.
All right. Okay, so moving on to our next question. This is from Maron Montano. So the question is, what are your thoughts on time-based versus effort-based estimation in the context of backlog refinement?
Okay, so when we say time based, it's like we're using story points and it pertains to a number of days or hours. I'm guessing that's the question. So with me, that's okay. But if we're using story points, I would suggest to have the time, not an exact, not a precise number, right? So say if we're doing 1 point, right, it's not equivalent to just 1 day. I would suggest that there's a range, because again, estimation, we're not really aiming for precision, we're aiming for relative sizing, right? So if you have, and it's just supposed to be a guide, what's important is the actual. So if you're estimating, probably a 1 point would be 30 minutes to a day, or something like that, and or 2 hours to a day, something like that, and then your 2 points would be 1 to 3 days. But again, do not dwell on the estimation. I would suggest you also utilize or leverage on historical data, so velocity, right? If it's something that the teams have already done before, make them reflect on that, right? It's a user story that's similar to what you guys have worked on previously.
All right. So our next question is from Kenichi Yuang. So the question is, any agile anti-patterns or dark patterns or pitfalls that we should watch out for?
Yes, so of course, just not having that mindset change, right? Just saying that we're doing agile because we're using the tool, or we're using sprints. And if you're actually doing the events, um, not doing it properly, like you have sprint planning scheduled, but it gets canceled, or backlog refinement is not happening as often as it can be. And these are some things to watch out for, if because it's more of a muscle memory for you to understand like the new ways of working. And once you stop doing those things or go back to how you do things in the old way, then it's obviously gonna derail you from uh, learning how to actually do Scrum or Kanban. And for leaders, if they're probably part of some town halls or discussions, if they do not react on, like, if you're currently sharing where you're currently at in terms of the transformation, if they're not really that interested, then I would suggest that that's a red flag. So make sure that it's communicated, right? At the end of the day, it will still be up to the leaders why they want to do this. So if it's not working for them, make sure that it's shared with you also, so you also understand why they think it's not working for them.
All right. So next question, what's the difference between a scrum master and an agile coach?
Okay, so a scrum master actually is supporting Scrum teams. So an agile coach doesn't necessarily have a team that they're currently supporting. Like in my case, when I was a Scrum master, I was a Scrum master for 3 teams. Right, so I was ensuring that all the Scrum events are happening, scheduling, facilitating, and as an agile coach, I actually support multiple teams. I also do have catch ups. I do have touch bases with our leaders, right? Because they're the ones, of course, supporting this transformation. So making sure that I share with them where the agile teams are currently at. So it's mostly um, enabling teams as well. So if you do trainings before you actually build a team, you have to ensure that they're trained. So I like in our current client, they're currently practicing safe. So we ensure that they're currently trained, leading safe by for the leaders, and also safer teams for the team members. So an agile coach is all around basically. So unlike a scrum master where you really have one or two or three teams that you focus on.
All right. So the next question is, which agile techniques do you find the most productive?
Okay, so for me, it's really transparency, right? So and feedback. So at the end of each sprint, what do you actually want to achieve, right? So during sprint planning, you have to have that aligned with your teams, and so at the end of the sprint, you actually achieve your goal, right? If not, why? So you have to be able to facilitate that discussion for your teams to understand why they did not meet their goal, and at the same time, solicit feedback from them so that as a team they can also work on how to improve on that in the next sprints.
All right. So we have a lot of questions, Papu, to go through.
Okay,
So
we don't have
this
time.
is a
Last
question
question.
that is also voted many times. So this is from Genevieve, Joven, and Renal. So the question is, how do you maintain a great agile team culture in a growing team?
Yes. So like I mentioned earlier, team building activities. If your teams are working virtually, then all the more you have the opportunity to have activities like team building activities, right? Simple as like setting like coffee time. Even if you're virtually online, you're all drinking coffee at the same time, doing some small talk, just making sure that you don't talk about work if you can avoid, so that you have that environment of actually just building the relationship with your team members. If you can also have face-to-face activities like a normal dinner or lunch out, that actually helps a lot. So making sure that you have the time to also mingle with your team members, not just how they do the work. It's important they're actually enjoying what they're doing.
All right. So another question po from Miss Diane May Ramos. So the question is, what strategies can be used to overcome resistance to cultural change when transitioning to agile methodologies?
Okay, so cultural change, again, this is tricky because it will differ in different organizations. Like I've been part of course, global organizations and local organizations, and you can actually see the difference. If your leaders are more supportive, um, they would want to understand why some teams are having a difficult time in their transformation. So, having that venue of communicating where the organization is currently at, right? So, if they're not supportive, then that's something that really needs to be watched out for. So, if you can try and if you don't have the capacity, try and reach out to someone that is part of the leadership team also, that you can communicate this, like if it's not working because there's no support from some of the leaders, then that's automatically a culture thing. And if on the other hand, if your teams are resistant because they don't really want to learn, they don't really want to change because they've been doing things for a long time and it's working for them. So again, communicate why. Why are we doing this? Why do we want to go agile in the first place? If it's working for everybody, why do we have to go agile? Someone has to be able to understand, or sorry, to answer that. If no one is no one knows why they're doing it, then there has to be a discussion about it. So yeah.
I think that's the last question, Miss Marielle, that we can entertain. I'm afraid our time is up for this session. So I know you have a lot of questions for Miss Marielle. So Miss Marielle, I hope you can answer their questions in the Q&A chat box, or you may chat with Miss Marielle here on our Ermit platform. You may also visit the Quantrix booth. All right. So that's all the time we have for this session. So if you enjoyed this session, please give your rating and share your feedback for our speaker. You'll find the link in the chat box. So again, let's thank Miss Marielle by clicking on the heart and clapping emojis. All right, thank you so much. So you may now exit this session and click on the next. Bye.
Thank you. And I'll be at the Quatrix booth if I'll try to answer more of your questions. Thank you, Camille, also. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Have a good rest of the day.